Hey everybody, Ed Casper here. It is January 1st, 2021. We made it. I'm just up here at the shop. Everything's cleaned up, cleaned out, and we're ready for the new year, whatever it may bring. The only thing I can say about 2020 in general is the next time someone says to you that they know what's going to happen or they can predict this or that, well, they're liars, because nobody predicted what happened in 2020. So with that, I want to take a few minutes to talk about some important stuff that I learned on corn performance, hybrid performance, and planter performance in the year 2020. To start out with, if you've seen my other videos, you know this. I'm a big believer in the Peter Drucker philosophy of if you're going to manage something, you have to be able to measure that something. And whether it's assembly line, production, your checkbook, your body weight, you name it, you have to be able to measure it before you can get in and manage the ups and the downs and where you need to be. How that relates to corn hybrids and corn yields is your corn planter, how are you measuring performance? I like to see digging in the trench, stand counts, emergence flag tests, measuring the GDUs, and your planter variability check at the end of the season right before you harvest. These are the ways that you measure your performance so that you can manage your planter and manage your hybrids and get to those higher yields. When I ask farmers, and this happens, I don't know if I can say it happens a lot, but I'm not surprised when it does, and I say, okay, how are you managing your performance? How do you measure how things are going? Well, yeah, they'll say, I drove by that field, boy, it looked good all year. Translation, what that means is, I drove past it 60 miles an hour on my way to town for Taco Tuesday, where I spent 3 hours sitting at the bar. That's what that means. Then when I talk to people about how do they measure performance, and they did flag tests, they did do a stand count, now you're talking to someone who's in the hunt. Okay, number two is you have to be set up with your corn planter for the best possible performance that that planter can give you. Now that doesn't mean you wrote checks on the biggest, greatest widgets and gadgets and electric this and speed tube that, and that is not the case. We've seen some very good farmers with some very competitive yields with springs for the downforce and finger meters. That's fine. But there's no excuse to not have your planter set up for premium performance. You can get that from YouTube videos. You can join a Randy Dowdy, David Hula Next Level group. They'll get your planter tuned in. Look at my other videos and give me a call. I mean, there's so many resources out there. Yeah, you might be able to go to an OEM dealer, but really when you talk to the movers and shakers, you just aren't going to get planter performance from an OEM dealer. They're in the business of moving their branded color of iron, and they could really care less. Get it out the door and get the next guy. There's no excuse to not have that corn planter dialed in for performance. So I'm just going to assume that you're dialed in and you know how to make that thing perform. Number three is when the guys talk on social media and say, spacing and singulation don't matter. Well, listen, it's 2021. We've been doing this precision planting thing now for what, 15 years, 18 years? If you don't have your spacing and singulation figured out by now, you ain't watching this video. There is no excuse on planet Earth to not have these things under control. So when you're talking about the singulation going from 98 to 99%, does that pay? Well, probably not, because it's going to cost you a lot of money to gain that 1%. But believe me, I would bet after what I've learned with Randy Dowdy and what I've learned with precision planting over the years, 60, 70% of the corn planters out there in America are crap. I mean, their performance is just embarrassing. So to go from 75% singulation and spacing up to 92, yeah, that pays. That pays big time. So what I'm telling you is, before you listen to this video and get carried away, know who you are. If you're dialed in and you know the performance points and you're ready to rock and roll, then you're ready for the next step. If you're not, call me. I'll be glad to help you. I will walk you through the simple things you should be doing, whether you own precision planting stuff or you've never even heard of them. So, having said that, one thing that Randy Dowdy talked about quite a bit was the saturated cold germ and the pericarp testing. I had done some saturated cold germ testing, and I didn't really do much with it. I'd heard Greg Sauter talk about it for years and years. Now remember, if you run a saturated cold germ test and it doesn't test very good, does that mean you have a bad hybrid? No. It just means, like Sauter always said, that just means he's a beach bum, not an Eskimo. What I learned in 2019 in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, is if the ground's fit, go. Okay? Let me say that again. If the ground is fit, go. Now, if the top inch is fit, and from 1 inch below is wet, sticky, tacky, cold, clammy, don't go. It's not fit. If the ground is fit, go. However, if you run out there with a hybrid and you haven't done a saturated cold germ test and it's April 20th and it's cold, you might be setting yourself up for a big failure. So I had 2 tests I sent in, and both of them came back poor, and I was not happy. One hybrid I sent out, I got a replacement in. The other hybrid I was stuck with because I had some seed left over from the previous year in 2019 and delayed planting and prevent plant, but just never mind. It was partially my fault, partially not. So I'm kind of stuck with that one. The saturated cold germ was poor and the pericarp was poor. Crap. But the first one, I got that one out, got the new one in, ran out of time, went out and planted. So here's what I learned. Number 1, the new hybrid that I got, I didn't have time to test. I planted it at very low populations in good conditions. But when I was running the planter, this is my planter tractor, I got the blade hooked up. You might hear it. It's snowing and sleeting right now. I'll be plowing snow later this afternoon. I'm out there planting and I'm thinking, I'm 12 hours too soon. I'm 12 hours too soon. Because I was kicking up dust, but just not enough. But I had to go because I had another farm to do, and then it was going to rain. And you got to go, you got to go. Okay, so I planted that. Went on to the next farm, planted the hybrid that had the poor scores. Ground was pretty warm by now. I did my custom stuff first. Planted that stuff. And then I planted a little 14 acres. We were going to do a competition plot. So I only had like 6 bags of this stuff, and I didn't send that in to test. So, the first farm with the new hybrid that I didn't test, it emerged like a king. It emerged so good, I almost wanted to call Orion Samuelson, have him come out and show off because it was that good. And I did about 8 stand counts, and I was dead nuts on the money. If I planted 31, there was 31. If I planted 29, there was 29. She was dead nuts. And remember the evolution of precision planting and Randy Dowdy. When we started, it was if you plant 34, we want 34 plants. Well, then it was we want 34 ears. Well, then it was we want 34 harvestable ears. Well, how do we get 34 harvestable ears? It's from emergence. Emergence in 72 hours, 48 hours. I've learned that the Randy Dowdy one is the best, 12 GDUs. We need these 31 plants to emerge within 12 GDUs. If we have that, we have full potential. Pour the coals to it. So that one's off to a good start. The other one that I knew was shaky, and it had a bad pericarp test. It was exactly what you thought it would be. I planted 34. I was lucky to get 28, 29. It felt like a train wreck in my gut, but it wasn't bad enough to really go rip it up and replant it. And I was frustrated to say the least. The good news was it's a flex hybrid, so it kind of helped me out of that mess, but it wasn't great. So then we go to our little 14 acres of our competition. And I planted 37 500 for population, and I flag tested it, and I had 32 up within the 12 GDUs. That's exciting, right? Well, what about the other 5? They weren't there, they weren't there, they weren't there. I came back a week later, there they are. So out of 37, I had 20% almost that didn't emerge in the 12 GDUs. And my seed guys are like, well, boy, that's exciting. You're going to push that for competition? I'm like, no. The potential, that high-level top potential was gone. The Emergence told me that. So let's fast forward to fall. What did I get? The farm that emerged poorly and had the bad saturated cold germ in the pericarp tests, it yielded poorly. The farm, the little 14 acres that the Emergence was good, but it wasn't awesome, that yielded like a monster. It really did. However, I left a ton on the table because it didn't perform. And the stuff that emerged great and had a stand count that was great and everything was just textbook, that's the best yield we've pulled off that field in maybe the 30 years that my dad and I have farmed it. So I knew June 10th what my yields were going to be November 10th. I already knew what was going to happen. Yeah, there was weather involved in the derecho. I understand all that. But I knew June 10th which one needed to be pushed and which one needed to just unhook the pin and say, you're on your own. I can't afford to put any more money towards you. Now, let's keep one thing in mind. Same planter performance, same foo-foo juice in furrow, same fertility, same this, same that, same everything. So that's where I've changed my philosophy a little bit on my in-furrow products. And I'm taking the tanks on my planter and I'm pulling the in-furrow off. I'm going to keep the ketons. I like my ketons. And those tanks are going to be used for 2x2x0. And you'll say, whoa, Ed, I've listened to Randy Dowdy talk. He said you have to be 3 inches deep. Well, I can't afford that. And I don't have big enough equipment for that. And so to hell with it. I'm going to do 2x2x0. Water attracts water. Since when do we plant corn and we're not being chased by a rain? I'll take my chances. I can't afford to be everything. The other thing that I'm doing different is I'm going back to dry insecticide on my planter. We're seeing enough pressure up here. The bugs and the weeds are getting pretty serious, and I need to get serious back against them. So the lessons learned. If you are not doing a saturated cold germ and a pericarp test, I strongly encourage you to do both. You're sending the stuff in anyhow. Do both. I kind of trust the seed companies, but after kind of what I saw in 2019 with all the seed that got returned, I don't completely trust the seed companies. I would rather run my own test at my own preferred lab and get those results back. Don't do your own refrigerator test. If you send it off to a lab, make sure that it's a real, test. I send mine to Sodak Labs in South Dakota. I figure if anybody knows how to grow corn in cold weather, it's people in South Dakota. There's, I'm sure, a ton of other labs that are just as good or maybe better, but I like them folks. They're good to me. They do a good job. They're quick and they're reasonable. So, your corn planter performance matters towards your emergence. There's no question. But your hybrid vigor, your hybrid strength, that has just as much to do with it. That doesn't mean that if it isn't testing perfectly that you're going to have a bad yield. You just better change the way you manage it. I custom farmed for some dairy farmers, wonderful people. We had a great year with them this year. But they wanted to plant some silage ground, and I just said, it's kind of cold. Got to go. Dairy farmers, got to go. And they came back later in the year, and they're like, well, the stand, it's not great because there's the seeds there, but it didn't germinate. And I says, guys, do you remember when we planted? There was 0 GDUs in the next 8 days on the forecast map. 8 days, 0 GDUs. You've got to expect a little bit of stress. Well, yeah, they kind of forgot about that. So, as always, thanks for watching. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. We'll be doing more of this stuff. Call me with questions, 309-208-0117. If you think you know about dialing in a corn planter, but you want to know more, trust me, there's no stupid questions. Feel free to call. That's what we do. So with that, Happy New Year. Good luck in 2021. Have a profitable year, and we'll talk to you soon.